we're studying occurred. Some examples of primary sources would be eyewitness accounts, original documents, surviving objects, photographs, audio or video recordings. These are all examples of primary sources. Primary sources are valuable because they are closest to the action, as close to the action as anyone can be. A primary source has not been handled by others, each contributing his own interpretations and biases to the record. So a primary source is usually a more accurate record of the original event as the eyewitnesses originally experienced it.
Of course, we don't have any video recordings of the Punic War, so.
In the courtroom, a secondary source is called hearsay evidence. It is information given by someone who was not at the original scene, but who heard about it from someone else. The more times that a story has been handled, usually the less reliable it becomes. Some examples of secondary sources would be history textbooks, encyclopedias, and historical novels. These are all examples of secondary sources. So if I wrote a history of World War II, that history would be a secondary source because I did not live during World War II. Here's an example. In about 472 BC, a man named Aeschylus wrote a historical play called The Persians. It's a very valuable historical play. And it presents in dramatic form the invasion of Xerxes and his overthrow by the Greeks at Salamis. This play is considered a primary source of the very highest quality for two reasons. First, the play was written only a few years after the Battle of Salamis, and secondly, Aeschylus was actually present at the Battle of Salamis. Now here's another example. Herodotus, you've probably all heard of Herodotus. He wrote a book called The History, which is an historical account of the wars which Persia waged against Greece. Now, Herodotus is also considered a primary source, but it's not as of high quality as my previous example. Herodotus was born in 484 BC, so he wasn't even alive for most of the time about which he wrote. He was not an eyewitness to the events he described. Yet, historians prefer to consider Herodotus as a primary source because he wrote the history shortly after the events, and we have almost no other record for that time period. Most of ancient historical literature falls within the second category. All right, let's go over the handout that you have, the second page.
Not this one?
Yes. We divided Greek and Roman authors into three main classifications. The first classification lists those authors which we believe are very useful to read, but again, which we believe that parents should pre-read. And this classification includes the historians, the geographers, the biographers, the orators, the rhetoricians, logicians, the grammarians, scientists, physicians, and the fables. These are all very valuable authors to read. The second classification lists those authors whom we believe should be read by mature Christians, and that would include the philosophers and the Christian apologists. Some of the writings of the Christian apologists are appropriate for younger students, but the parent would need to make that determination. And the third classification lists those authors whom we believe to have questionable or graphic content, and that would include the poets and those who wrote the satires, the tragedies, and the comedies. Now, none of these classifications is absolute, and we note a few exceptions on the handout that you see there. A lot of this information that we have been talking about is in our book, Ancient History from Primary Sources. We go over all the different authors, talking about them, and then we have the actual full text English translation on CDs also. Does anybody have any questions about what we've been discussing? We're about out of time now. Yes.
Does anybody have any potential jokes?
Yes.
I'm going to joke. I have a question. What about myths for young children?
Mythology? Well, you're asking me my opinion?
Yes.
Okay. I think we avoid reading mythology. I think it comes into that third category of some questionable graphic content. Those are the lines that we have drawn in our family, and you would need to determine that for your own self, determine the principles that you have in your family for what is good literature and what is not good literature.